All right, welcome everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming and joining Cara and my name twin, Cara.
That's right.
And we're going to talk today with Cara. She's taught for us before on the writer's block, and I'm so delighted that she's back today to talk to us. And the topic that she is going to talk about is called "Doing What You Can While Finding Peace in What You Can't." So I think this is a good message. I was telling her earlier, I need this a lot right now. I think I'm feeling limitations in every which way I go. But Cara, why don't you tell us a little bit about this topic and why it's important to you and why you're going to talk to us about that this week?
I would love to. Well, this is probably one of my favorite topics because it's one of my most needed topics. And it goes back, more than 20 years probably, that the seed of this idea was just first planted in my heart. And it was when we were newly married. And as I mentioned, my member intro just happened to fall on this week. So as I mentioned yesterday, in that my husband works in New York, so he has a long commute. We were newly married and just establishing all the things that, come with newlyweds. And we were also starting up the college and young adult ministry at our church, kind of all within, just months of one another. And we were meeting with one of my mentors from college, and my husband kind of just shared the concern, like, this is kind of a lot happening all at one time, and I hope we can really give to these college students what we can and everything. And he said to us, I just want to encourage you, don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can do. And that was just this little sentence that got tucked away into my heart. Like I said, more than 20 years ago, don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can do. And that really guided us through so much of that transitional time. And it has been something that I have needed to draw upon, because it's both proactive, but it's yet comforting, and it's assuring. It's just everything that I find that the Lord wants to encourage me in any given season, to not let what I can't do keep me from doing what I can do. So that is when and how this topic really took form in my heart many years
I
ago.
I appreciate that. I love number one that it was a sentence spoken to you 20 some years ago that just stuck with you. And I think we all have stories like that, right? You hear just one little thing and it resonates into your life for many years to come. But also,
Yeah.
like, I think I feel this pressure. I think we all see it everywhere, which is just like this message of empowerment, especially for women, that we can just do it all, right? And so, therefore, that comes with all of this pressure that we can and therefore we should do all
Right.
the things. And
Right.
and then we're also kind of weighted down with that pressure that comes at us all the time that why should we feel the limitations that obviously God intended for us to feel? We're not omnipotent. We can't do everything at all the times, and yet that's kind of the message we're being sold today.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, in a way, because I think and this is kind of off this is kind of off topic, but it goes with what you've just said. Um, you know, we all have these struggles, I think, with that we have to overcome, whether we call that imposter syndrome or whatever we call it, that we overcome. And then we get to a place where we say, yes, Lord, I'll do it. And then it's like, the door's not opening, or there's not the opportunity, or whatever. And so I've been thinking about what a funny thing that is, that sometimes when we get to the place where we say, yes, yes, Lord, I'll do this because you've worked such a work of freedom within my heart. And then that opportunity is not there. But sometimes I think it is just what you said. It's a place of surrendering and finding that those limitations are not necessarily a bad thing. They're always for a purpose, and God knows. I mean, we have to just trust his timing and his ways. But the limitations I have found, whether it's through that or just because of, there's only so much I can handle at one time or whatever, it's always done a work in my heart of just drawing me back closer to him, and just, that wrestling within my heart is always what ends up happening as I just cry out for whether it's that peace or contentment or whatever it is. There's a need that is revealed through that limitation that God ends up meeting every time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's such a work that happens in us so often, right? When we're
Mm.
confronted with that space of feeling limited. So, is there anything in particular that you've gone through recently, or how, or is this idea of doing what you can, how is that impacting the way you live, maybe the way you write these days?
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, yes, because as I've mentioned, this is a word of encouragement that I have needed constantly for the last 20 years. So I would say in some way or another, I've had to apply it in every season of life that I've gone to, because season of life has limitations. And I mean, I don't think there's one season that wouldn't in some form or another. And every season there seems to be that there's something that quote unquote is preventing me, right? From doing something that is on my heart or that I want to do. And yet every season also has unique opportunities to fulfill what God is calling me to do. So absolutely, every season of my life, I have needed this. But before I get to the present, because this also kind of lays the groundwork, one of the deepest ways this truth was really worked in my heart was when I had my first child, and he's 18 now. And so it was that long ago, and just struggling with how my life was changing, and having to step aside from some things because now I have the responsibility of being a mom. And Psalm 1 was what was just so encouraging to me, where it talks about bearing fruit, the tree bearing fruit in its season. And the Lord just so encouraged me that you will bear fruit in accordance to the season that you're in. And so I had to reconcile, like, there's going to be some fruit that I've been used to bearing that I'm not going to be bearing now, because that would fall under the category of the things that I can't do right now. But there is going to be fruit that I bear now because of the season that I'm in now. And that would fall under the category of doing what I can do. And so that was really, again, just such a point of impact that I still look back to and say, as I look at the season, or as I have to struggle through finding that peace in what I can't do, to say, okay, but what season am I in? What fruit is it that God wants to bear right now? Because I know there's going to be fruit born, because I know as I'm abiding in him, he is bearing forth that fruit in me. I know that from John 15. So there's going to be fruit, but it may not look like what I want it to look like. But if I ask him and open my eyes to see what he's doing, I will see where he's working, maybe pruning, maybe producing, maybe doing something that is going to bring forth fruit. And so as I have gotten into, you know, writing or doing things that you all do, um, where I have found that well, I will say I found that I've had to apply this to like the nth degree, or like, at times a million, because whereas in, ministry, and I know a lot of you serve with your churches or ministry, or your family life or whatever, it just seems like, the busyness or the needs, they kind of ebb and flow, right? Like, you kind of know I'm entering into a season where I'm just going to be pressed. I am entering into such a full season. And then you kind of know, but oh, now I'm entering kind of into a restful season or whatever. But what I have found, anyways, is that, like, with writing or podcasting or whatever of those things, like, there is none of that. Like, the feeling that I need to do is just constant. And there is always something more that I need to do,
Mm.
you know, and so it doesn't ebb and flow like the rest of my life does. And so it just feels like there's this constant nagging at times, like this beckoning to do this, to create that, to change, you know, to update your website, like April is doing, you know, update this, do more of that. And so I have learned that's just not sustainable. Obviously, it's not even desirable for me to go at that pace. And so I have really had to allow these words, do what you can, or, you know, don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can do. And then the principle from Psalm 1 that there will be fruit born in its season. I've had to just really allow those to just guide me and work in me so very much so that I can purposefully pursue the peace that I long for in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, you said too, like it kind of all started 18 years ago
Yeah.
when you had your first child. And I think we all know what that's like when you have something new or big in your life that's pressing up against your time. It's pressing up against your schedule, your inner agenda, ever that is that you're trying to accomplish, and there's something that's preventing that from carrying forward. Like you're, for some
Yeah.
reason, you're not able to do all the things that you want to do, or there's new stressors on your life, right? And so I think with that is like that seasonal aspect of life where it's like there are just seasons that are busy, and then they're usually followed with a season of like some respite, some rest, some time off, maybe, hopefully, right? But
Right. Right.
um that it's in those seasons when like things are ramping up and you're confronted with the fact that I can't do all the things I want to do,
Mhm.
and therefore do I just throw up my hands in defeat, or do I do what Cara is suggesting, which is do what you can
Mhm.
in those seasons of life? And maybe it's not all the things that you would like it to be, but um, it's what you can do in that time and finding grace despite that, those limitations, right?
Yeah, I love that. And it really, you know, challenges the all or nothing mentality that some of us can have, you know, where, like you said, if I can't do all of it, I'm not going to do any of it. And so I think that's a common mentality that we may fall into, but it really is so it's so limiting because when are we going to be able to do all of it?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and
And when have we ever been able to do all of it? And why do
right,
we think that that's like what God wants us to do? Right? So
exactly. That's right.
often it's the things that we put on ourselves. Space
Mhm.
just commented, even if we're pacing ourselves well and it's not busyness, this also applies to hard seasons where we are just dealing with some intense warfare that makes it harder to keep pushing forward with our writing or other responsibilities. Do you want to
I think
speak to
so.
that?
Well, yeah, yes. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly because what I found is sometimes there's things, it's not so much that my time is busy and my time is limited, but my capacity is limited, meaning what I can take on in my mind and in my heart, because there's just a lot going on that is filling my mind and my heart. And like the last thing I can even think about is opening social media or, you know, creating something or doing something because there's just no room for that. Not necessarily in my calendar. Sometimes it's my calendar. Sometimes it's within me. And so on those time during those times too, I need to just give grace and recognize I can't do that right now. But again, there's something else that God is working and that God is doing, and that's okay. That's where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think you drew the name of this talk that you were inspired by something you found in the Word in Mark 14. Do you want to share with us a little bit about that story
Yeah.
of
Yes.
Jesus with Mary?
Well, and it's one that you're all so familiar with, I know, but it's one of my favorites. And so it's when she comes in, and we're going to read it and we're going to not dissect it, but we're going to go into it more on Thursday. So hopefully we can all come back, or at least it's recorded. But I'll just read just a verse. But she comes in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume, and she broke open the jar and poured the perfume over his head, it says in Mark 14. And, there's different responses. Some are indignant. Some say, why waste such expensive perfume? And, there's just, you can imagine a whole lot of different reactions. But Jesus said, leave her alone. Why criticize her for doing such a good thing to me? And then he goes on and he says, she has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. And then he goes on to say, wherever the good news is spread, her deed is going to be commended and discussed. And I just think the fact that Jesus acknowledged she did what she could. I mean, that's what we all want, right? I mean, we
Mhm.
might feel the pressure. We might feel the pressure from others. It may be that constant nagging of I got to do more. But if we can find rest and peace and Jesus saying she's done what she could and knowing that he commends that, then that is a beautiful thing to me.
That is so beautiful. And here we are, thousands of years later, commending her work, right? Just as
Mhm.
Jesus said, it's being fulfilled right now that she did what she could.
Yeah.
And that is an encouragement to us today that the Lord knows what
Hmm.
we can and can't do, right? And so
Right.
if you're feeling that today, like ladies on this call or who listen to the replay, like know that the grace of the Lord sees you and sees where you're at and your limitations. And he knows that you can only do what you can do, right? Like
Yeah.
I find that that's such a sweet
Love
encouragement. And
that.
it just, I hope, touches all of us and whatever we're feeling our limitations really pressing in.
Hmm. That's right. That's right. And it goes along the lines with just hearing that well done, good and faithful servant, which I know has captured all of our hearts to hear that. And so I think as we allow his word to just go deep into our heart, because there are times where I'll say it and I'll know it. I've even put that in as a win here in our group. Like, here's my win. Like, I know I'm not saying I'm behind on something. I know I'm on God's timetable, but so it's one thing, where we can say it. But then to really and even know it and even believe it, but then to allow it to bring the peace that we are longing for. um, I'm so grateful that he will do that by his spirit, because I don't want to
Absolutely.
just know it. I need to live it. I need to have that peace when I'm confronted with all of the things, all of my shortcomings, or where I'm not, getting done what I want. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. So much grace and so much peace can be ours even in those seasons. So you have said that as we shift our perspective from the frustration of what we can't do because of our lack of time, ability, etc., we also learned ways to see what we can do and how we can serve. So
yeah.
why do you think that's such a challenge for us? And what is one way that maybe we could start making that mindset shift in our own lives?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge because, or such a challenge because of like what I alluded to, that it's just so constant in what we do, right? When we're writing or just doing, um, you know, just going on that journey of whatever that creative pursuit is, and we're managing our own time and kind of our own projects or our own expectations. I mean, it's just constant. It is never, um, unless we purposefully schedule a break or a vacation or whatever. Otherwise, it is just really so constant. It's always there. But I think one thing that we can do to just begin helping the shift is actually something that I heard Carrie them say last week at the Liberty Convocation, because nowadays, it's all live streamed. So just an attempt to feel close to my son the first few times I have been live streaming it, but I was so blessed. Some last week there, if you weren't here in the beginning, I was saying my son just started at a Christian university. So last week, the emphasis was that they were sharing with the students was you're part of a Christian university, but how can you still be part of a local church? Because that's really important. And that is, God's plan for you to be part of the local church, even though you're here at this Christian university. And so they were asking pastors that they were interviewing and stuff. So what does that look like to be a student and part of a local church? And one pastor said, well, let me put it this way. You are not called to be a superhero and do everything, but you are called to let God stretch you and need to expand you and learn how to use your time and all the things that college students need to learn. But I think that is so great for us too, as we're starting to really meditate on this truth and what this can mean for us, is to recognize we're not called to do everything. We're not called to be that superhero, but we are called to allow the Lord to stretch us, to guide us as we need to rely upon Him and all of that, and just to be faithful with what he's put in front of us. And it may be so cliche at this point to even say that, but there's such a truth and freedom when we recognize who's in front of me, what's in front of me, what is the thing that God is calling me to right now, and let me just be faithful to do that, because that is what I can do. And I heard an elderly lady one time share and I think it was just so profound coming from an elderly lady. And because she lived it her whole life, she said, God is not calling you or asking you to be faithful with those things that He has not led you or provided the opportunity for you to do. He's calling you to be faithful with the opportunities He has given you. And I thought, wow, sometimes so much of the stress or the feeling of the lack of peace in what I can't do are things that maybe the Lord's not ever asked me to do. I just see you guys do it, or, I see other people, oh, that's a really good idea. I should do it, or whatever. But just to recognize God's only calling me to do what He's given me the opportunity. I would add the capacity, the ability, not that we're not ever, not that we're going to ever stop learning and growing. That's obviously part of all of it, but just to recognize that difference.
Yeah, that's so good. What do I'm thinking too, as you're talking just about where I'm at in my own life. I was telling the ladies on the call before we started is that I just recently took on a full-time job in addition to my other things that I do, like the writer's block, which I would much rather do full time. But, there's all these new things that are kind of weighing in on my time. And I've noticed in my life, and maybe Cara, you in yours, it's like when there's a new thing that's introduced into your regular rhythm, like a new responsibility, a new challenge, a new struggle, we kind of expect ourselves to continue carrying on the way we were prior to the new thing coming in, right? Like we don't,
Yeah,
and I struggle to really give myself grace in that season of transition. I'm like, why is this so hard? I should be able to do all of these things perfectly.
right, right,
And yet I know that's not from the Lord. I know that. I know that's me putting
right.
pressure on myself. But how do you feel like, what do you say to somebody who's in that season where it's like the the responsibilities all feel really important? There's
Hmm.
people waiting on you, depending on you to show up on time, to turn in your
Right,
work on time, to
right.
pick up your parents and do the things you need to do on time.
Hmm.
And it's just hard to manage it all. And so sometimes it
Yeah.
feels like God has put all these things, and yet even in that, like, how am I supposed to get this all done?
Right. I think that's such a good observation and something I just went through like a week ago. I was starting to go down that road of just getting discouraged because, um, and it's funny how discouragement can work because it started out so innocently, but I just happened to be thinking about what I had done by this time last year versus this time this year, right? And I was like, wow, like I got all these other things done. I got all
Mm.
this other writing done. I got all this other stuff done. Um, so many different, opportunities to encourage people. And I just started to really get, like a little, even almost panicked. Like, am I getting lazy? Like what's happening? Why is this the case? And I had to talk to myself with these truths. I had to talk to myself and remind myself of all of these truths. And then I had to go back and be like, again, from that idea of Psalm 1 and the fruit in its season, like, okay, but what has your year consisted of? And I just started mentally thinking, like, all right, I graduated a senior, wanted to be present in all of his last things. I launched a kid to college, which is really huge. I stood by a child who was struggling in some areas of her personal life. I myself had a health scare that I needed to give some time and attention to. And like all these, like you're saying, all these new things of life and then even and a year-long house renovation. Like I think I first
Oh
told
yeah, just
Cara
like two.
like like a year ago we started ripping things out and that ended up taking way longer than we thought, but that was just completely disruptive. And so as I thought about all these things, I thought, like, the Lord just impressed upon my heart, you are so much more than a one-dimensional being. Like, you are not a one-dimensional, like, content producer or a one-dimensional this or a one-dimensional of that. Like, you are multi-dimensional of all these things and all these people. And again, I just had to find rest, and that was such an assurance. Like you've said, he sees and he knows and he cares. And it's me who has to let go of some of those expectations that I wanted to maintain the speed of life of what it was when now
Mm.
my life looks dramatically different. The Lord's not asking that of me. And so I need to come under under his leading and
Hmm.
in those times. And again, as we mentioned earlier, like even if it doesn't take up the time, it takes up our mental and our heart capacity. And so to give us that time um to just be in that space in that season. And again, even with my son in college, like I've told a few friends, like because I am watching the live streams and I am stalking, Carrie, they didn't have social media back then when you were at
Yeah,
Liberty, right? But
yeah,
now they have the Instagram and the Facebook, and I'm just spending way too much time doing that, because it makes me feel close to my son. And I told my friend, I'm allowing that. Like, it's not going to be like this forever. Like, I'm going through an adjustment. And so I'm just going to give myself grace, that word you've said so much, Cara, but just going to give myself that grace and know that if it's a couple weeks where I just need to do that for my own heart, I'm going to do it.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Kara, I want to open it up for comments and questions here in a minute, but would you tell us a little bit about what you have in store for us on Thursday?
Okay, yes. So on Thursday, and I think I probably just shuffled all my notes around, but on Thursday, we are going to take more of an in-depth look into Mark 14, and we're going to really, I'm hoping to challenge ourselves or to encourage us to look at what we do in whatever realm that we do it in a certain way. So I don't want to give that away, but if you want to, you can start thinking about if you had to describe or put a word to what you do. Like, is it a hobby, like with your writing and your creativity, like, is it a job? Is it a hobby? Like, Is it a calling? Like if you had to put a word to it, we're going to kind of start with that. And then from there, go into some principles that we can find from Mark 14, based upon her doing what she could. And I think we're going to find some real freedom in it. And we're along the way going to ask ourselves some questions like what season, like things that have come up today. What season am I in? What is my capacity currently? And we're going to look at what is in our hands right now. Like that jar was in hers. That's what she gave to the Lord that he was so pleased with, and what is in ours.
Mm.
So that's a little sneak
Oh,
peek.
I'm looking forward to that. That sounds great, Cara. And just while we're talking about seasons, I just want to mention that we have a download in the resource center that was for the writer's block, but it talks about our different seasons in correlation to the actual seasons of the year, right? And like summer is this time of harvest, or I'm sorry, summer is a time of like work, right? And then it's followed by the harvest, which is a time of reaping what you've sown, which is followed by winter, which is a time of rest. And spring is new growth, right? So I think there is something to that in the way the cycles, the seasons of our lives play out too. I tend to think that when I'm in a season of summer, when it's just all work, like this is the way it's always going to be, and it's not. And it's, we're in a season of intense work or stress or change or whatever. It's not always going to be that way, right? But we want to bear fruit in that
Right.
season, as
That's
someone
right.
and Cara reminded us too.
Yes.
So, with all that said, feel free to unmute. Tell us where you're at, ladies, with this whole idea of doing what you can in a season when you know you can't do it all.
I just saw Carrie's comment. I love it. Diminished capacity. That's great.
At one point I was teaching, administrating, getting my master's, taking care of my mother-in-law. And I just look back now and I think, how could I have ever done all of that? And I grew up in the era of the commercial that, I can I'll bring home the bacon fried up in a pan and never let you forget you're a man. You guys know that I'm probably older than most of the people on this. Okay. So yeah. So
Hilda knows. She just raised her hand.
you know the commercial. So, and every time you'd feel overwhelmed, somebody would quote to you, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And they'd give you something else to do, and I took it as a compliment when I was working. Oh, you're doing all of this. And the only person that we can know that will do this well is you. So here, we're going to give you this task to do. Like it was a compliment, like, okay, I can do it, and that's baloney. It's somebody else not taking responsibility or doing it when, and anyway, I could go on that. But the idea that I think what's cliche, Carrie, you said something was cliche. What is cliche is people just quoting, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, because he does not call us to do all things. And so he's not going to give us the strength to do all things. And I think it took me probably I'll be 60 this year, 50 of my 60 years to figure out that he did not call me to do all things, and I don't have to do it all. And little by little, I've been giving away all of the, I took on more tasks at church to, giving them away and being okay with, what, if it doesn't happen, or if it doesn't happen the way I think it should happen, not my problem.
Okay, yeah. I love that. And even when you look back and you're like, how did I do all that? Like, because Cara and I were just talking before we began, and with her new job and everything, and I was like, I'll be praying for you, like the Lord, just to stretch your capacity, because then he also does, like when it's him. I agree with you. There are so many things we put on that are not of him, that he's not calling us to. And then when it is, it's like, wow, he does stretch our capacity. There is grace for the moment. But I love that. I love that. Yeah, we need to think about, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and really how that was, what Paul said in regarding contentment and all the different things that he was facing. So that's a good word for us.
I kind of learned a long time ago not to be afraid to back out of things if I felt overwhelmed. Like if I bit off more than I could chew, I would just tell the person, like, I'm so sorry that I said yes to this, but I shouldn't have. And just kind of let them figure it out. And I think I learned that one of the, like, in my 20s, which is such a blessing. And not that I don't ever get it wrong, but I think like the lesson really started to substantiate with a friend of mine who told me that she had gone to visit a friend who would always say yes to everything. And and she was like super awesome servant in the church and always doing everything for everybody. And she got old and she was in a nursing home. And this my friend Sherry, who was like a decade, or I mean a generation older than me, but also very much like me, like her and I, she's like a second mom to me and has known me my entire life. And anyway, she gave the best advice because of that, because we were so much alike, but she's older and wiser. So she told me that she went to visit her friend in the nursing home and they had to put her on antidepressants because she never learned how to be still. And so for me, I think one of the reasons why I have, and then Sherry said, I need to learn how to be still now before it's too late. And that was like one of those one-liners that saved my life early on. And anyways, I think that lesson of external stillness was really, really good for me. But the internal stillness is what I fight against all the time because I'm so ADD. And it started back then where the Lord was like, you need to learn how to like make your brain shut up. But for me, it's like, it's not even, it doesn't have to be like people putting stuff on my plate because I know how to say no to people trying to put stuff on my plate. And I almost like enjoy it because I'm like, nice try, buddy. Like you're just trying to shove your crap off on me. You know what I mean? Like, but me having to learn how to still my own soul and to be able to like function at a reasonable pace and not uh, like not let the pressures that reside within consume me is the hardest part for me, and that's something that I fight against every single day of my life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that is a hard thing for us to be still and know. And yeah, you can sit still, I'm sure, but like in that sort of maybe. But the internal quieting of the soul, that's a harder skill to learn for sure.
I've been on spiritual retreats where you don't talk from Monday to Saturday, unless you're having a spiritual consultation, but there's no chit chat. And the first day they tell you, now it's one thing to be quiet by your mouth, but we want you to go deeper than that. We want you to go quiet with your eyes. So instead of walking into a room and going, oh, look, what's going on over there? What's going on over there? Like try to quiet your eyes too, and just use your eyes where you need them rather than taking it all in. And then the third way of silence is to silence the mind, like Space was talking about, and just let your mind be quiet and focus on the Lord and not think about what you're going to do when you get home and what do you have to do after this and what but to quiet that. And I found I've done it a few times and it takes me like 2 days to get to that point. Like all the first day, my mind is still going, did I remember to close that? Did I remember to shut that off? Did I remember to take care of the kids? And then by the second, third day, like right around the third day, I'm like, okay, I've got it now. Like I'm focused on him. I'm not thinking about everything else. I'm not looking at everybody else. I'm focused on him. And then like the day before we're kind of come out of it, the same thing happens as I start going, okay, so tomorrow I'm going home and I got to do this and this and this. And this.
Yeah.
But at least I've had that experience. Like I know how to do it. It's just really hard when you're in the thick of things. And even if we can just take a few moments each day to do that, it's amazing how peace inducing it is, and how it's like being Mary of Bethany and sitting at his feet and just being able to say, it's okay. This is the most important thing I need to be doing right now.
Mm.
And just one other thing that you guys were talking about that I wanted to throw out there was I read somewhere that there's always enough time to do God's will. And I had to remind myself of that because, like you, Cara, having a full-time job and all these other things going on at the same time, and a family and a husband and everything else, there'll always be time for God's will. There just may not be time for all that we thought we were going to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that kind of comforting of like, right, okay, there's enough time to do what he wants me to be doing. There may not be enough time for everything.
That's right.
I might be botching the quote, but I think it was Martin Luther that said something like, I have so much to do today that I need to spend an extra hour in prayer, or I need to spend 2 hours in prayer or something.
Yeah.
Like,
It's Francis D. Sales. I love Francis D. Sales. And he says something like everyone should spend a half an hour a day in prayer. And if you're really busy, you should spend an hour in prayer.
And I think you guys, honestly, at least in my life, when I have gotten to the point where I fail to be still, like what I was talking about earlier, and I was like, every day was planned out. I had to do this on this day, teaching and going to classes and administrating and all of that kind of stuff. The Lord will find ways to make us be still, and sometimes it's painful. And so it's important that we follow his commands to rest before he imposes it on us.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I mean, I know I had to learn the hard way to figure out how to rest, and still I have to make myself do it. I'm getting better. I've almost mastered resting and relaxing, but I'm afraid I'll have to go back to work all the time if I master it. So, so I don't want to get too good at it.
Yeah.
I used to set the timer on my, like when my kids were little, when I was like really learning from Mary of Bethany and from my friend Sherry making that comment. I decided that I needed to learn stillness. And so I would set my timer for 5 minutes, and I worked my way up to 15 to go sit on my back porch and just like try to silence everything internally, and just like I was allowed to think about Jesus and nature, and that was it. I could talk to God, and I could observe the trees and the stars and all that, but it felt like being electrocuted. It was so hard. I mean, just forming that habit was like brutal, and still sometimes I'm like, I think I need to set a timer for myself today.
It's not a bad practice, really, because I do think it takes time to really train ourselves. I go downstairs in the morning early every day, and then I'm like scrolling through my feed real quick, and I think we're putting all this stuff on ourselves, and then we're expecting ourselves to sit and be still and be quiet before the Lord. Like that's backwards for me. Like I shouldn't be starting my day that way. And yet that's so often the way I do it. And so it's harder to get still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a result.
What do you guys think about having your stillness time in the evening instead? It's really hard in the morning. Even if I get up early, well, then people get up earlier, and yet I have fought the idea of having my stillness time at night because it seems like it's more powerful in the morning to get you started on the right foot. But then so many mornings just get away from me. What do you guys think about that?
I think
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, right. Is that what you were gonna say? Spades, go ahead.
I was going to say I used to really struggle with feeling insecure about not getting up before my kids, because they would wake me up with their heckling noises, and I was like, oh no, like, and I'm not a morning person, and the Lord, and I really condemned myself for it because I didn't feel like I was a very proficient Christian because I didn't get up early enough, but the Lord used my strong desire to meet with him, and my inability to wake up earlier to actually show my kids a longing for the word. And so I thought that was really a beautiful lesson to me, like not to beat myself up over that kind of thing, but just to know that the longing is what he's after, and the pursuit of him, not the time that I accomplish it, you know. But I'm with Cara, where if I wake up and I start scrolling Facebook, I've already derailed myself, and like that is not the right way for me to start my day, because I'm literally probably damaging my brain by making myself more attention deficit by doing something that is not soul restful, not fruitful, and absolutely just wasting my time and brain capacity. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry if I'm talking too much, guys.
When I'm a morning person, so it's not a big deal for me to get up, and that's my first thing. And my children aren't all morning people, so it was easy for them to be, they would still be sleeping, and I would be awake, and the house would be quiet, and so that's how I'd start my day. And that's just my nature. That wasn't me being like, an efficient Christian or whatever. That was my survival mode of, I'm going to get up and be up earlier. My mom, who was not a morning person ever my whole life, and she would do her Bible reading at night, and we were doing this prayer journal, and part of the prayer journal was to confess. She's like, how long do you have to spend on this confess part? And I'd be like, well, I have a lot less to confess if I start it before daylight in the morning, because I haven't sinned quite so much in the day. And so I said, but you probably have a lot more to confess because you're not doing it till right before you go to bed. And she would just laugh. We would laugh about that because, because by the time I went to sleep and I said my evening prayers or whatever, I had kind of, the Lord and I had come to terms with whatever I'd done for the day pretty much. So when I woke up the next morning, I didn't have quite so many things lurking as I did if I waited till the end of the day. So we always would laugh about that back and forth about, well, if you wait till the end of the day, maybe that's why all these people get up early and encourage you to do it first thing in the morning. So you have less to confess.
That's fun.
That's great.
Well, thank you both for that, because it's true. I am not a morning person. And yet when I force myself to do it, unfortunately, the other morning people in my family are like, oh, good, you're up. And they come in and they start, bothering me and asking me stuff. And I hate to send my husband away, and be like, honey, leave me alone. But he's just like, oh, good, you're up. I need to ask you this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, okay. So I like the idea of doing it kind of more in the middle of the day and letting them see me do it space. I really like that idea.
Oh, for me, it was really funny because it was because I had 3 little boys. So like 2 of them especially could eat an army full of food. Like, I mean, they were just like the firstborn went to college and called me a couple weeks later to tell me that he ate about twice as much as the guys his age. And his littlest brother could eat as much as him. So food is their love language. So anyways, I would throw breakfast in front of them and run to the back because I really wanted to get a little bit of time in the word, but it was like scraping crumbs, it was like, I got 5 minutes before they're coming after me for seconds. And when they were teenagers, I was telling somebody that story, and Forrest was there, the firstborn that ate twice as much as all the other guys his age and more than the football players. Like, oh gosh. So anyways, he was like, I remember that. And I remember that I would always come looking for you to get seconds and you would be in your room reading the Bible. And I was like, man, that's cool, because he grew up to really love the Bible. And I realized that I got the same thing from my mom, who was like groveling before the throne because she had dealt with some severe struggles from, like, my dad abandoned her with 2 little kids when I was 4. I was a prodigal child. And I would just watch her like run into her little bathroom vanity and just cry out and sit on the floor with her Bible. And it was like from this place of like guttural pain that she was praying. And for me, it was like this place of like desperation. And like, I don't get any time alone. Like my whole day is spent trying to keep my kids out of the morgue and the ER, and like from killing each other or doing it. And not that they would have done it on purpose, but the ways, I mean, boys are, anybody who raises boys understands it's chaos. So anyways, but it was so beautiful to me to see how God used that my son in his teenage years was like, I remember, isn't that cool? So anyway,
There's a story about Susanna Wesley, Charles Wesley's
with the apron.
It was his mom, right? And she would go in the morning, put an apron over her head. She had like 16 or 18 kids. And they just knew when mom's apron was over her head, she was in her little tent of meeting. with the Lord, and they knew you do not bother mom when she's under the apron, which I think is a sweet, sweet way to live out your faith in front of your kids. So important, right, Cara, that we have that connection point with the Lord at some point during our days, so that even then, like, I think that whole idea of feeling our limitations, feeling that we can't do all the things that we want to do, it's mitigated somehow when we're connected to the vine, when we're abiding, when we're finding that daily communion with him. It really influences the way we see our to-do lists. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It really does. And I find that the way that time looks for me really does change with each season. And so just recognizing that, I love what Space talked about with the desire. And like you said, knowing the difference. I mean, am I able to be in the word right now, or am I choosing to do something else right now? But yeah, that time just really does look different. And again, out of our limitations, God can do beautiful things. On this topic specifically, like I mentioned in my introduction yesterday, for 10 years, I led the young moms group at our church. And one of those early on years, we just read a devotional because I had little kids at the time, very young kids. So I wasn't really teaching it at that time. It led to that as my kids got older and I had more time. But one of those devotionals talked about how she saw, I'll just summarize it, but the lesson that she learned through the waking up at night and being exhausted in the morning, unable to be in the word, the constant diaper changes, all that stuff. She said it was that she learned that she had her time with God in this little box, and it was motherhood and all the demands upon her at that time that she learned what it meant to walk with God all throughout her day and to abide in him. And that so stuck with our moms, because that was always the number one question of a new mom. Like, how do I have my quiet time now? Like, I used to have an hour and now I don't have like 15 minutes to myself, or now I'm like falling asleep, or like the number one question we always were getting when new moms were coming in was, how do I have this quiet time? And moms who had been there when we did that devotional would go straight to that devotional. I'm telling you, it was the most impactful thing for these moms to recognize that God was actually calling them to viewing it a whole new way. And they thought that they didn't have God in a box, like Cara, you love to write about with holy leisure and all that. Like, they thought that they were enjoying God through all the day, but it was those limitations that forced them to recognize, wow, I'm now learning how to commune with him all day long. So we obviously want to have that purposeful time, but it's going to look different in each season. It's going to be different. The length is going to be different, but it is the beauty of getting to know what it looks like to walk with him and abide in him all day long. And I love something that Kay Smith, Chuck Smith's wife, said when my pastor's wife sat under them, and she would tell them, your quiet time is like a meal, and just as you eat different amounts day to day, maybe not Space's sons, but most of us, we eat different amounts day to day. Some days we're hungrier, some days we're not. She said, you can approach the word of God that way. Like, there's going to like eat until you're filled. So there's going to be times you're reading, and I mean, you're reading 2 chapters, 3 chapters, and then that's the word like that God has for you for that day. And she said other days it might be like you're on the 2nd verse and you're just like, that was the word that I needed to ingest and now meditate upon, and you know what I mean? And so that also brought a lot of freedom, not just checking a box, but like opening the word and being like, Lord, let me just read till I know I got that daily word, that manna for the day. And it might look different day to day.
Oh, I love that so much. Taste and see that the Lord is good, right?
Yeah. Oh, amen.
Well, this has been such a sweet time and fruitful and filling. Let's just carry all of the metaphors.
Yeah.
Let's just describe it in all the ways we've talked about it today. But this has been great, Cara. Thank you so much for pointing our hearts in this direction to be reminded to do what we can, and that the Lord sees that, and that there's fruit to be grown in
Yes.
each season of our lives. So we're looking forward to meeting again on Thursday. I think, is it same time, Cara? I don't
Yes, same
recall.
time.
Same time.
Mhm, same time.
All
Yes,
right.
thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Great to see you
Yeah,
guys. All
great
have a great
discussion
day.
today. All right. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
Bye.